The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. Religion is the opium of the people. The production of too many useful things results in too many useless people. Workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Capital is dead labor, which, vampire-like, lives only by sucking living labor, and lives the more labor it sucks. The theory of communism may be summed up in one sentence: abolish all private property. Reason has always existed, but not always in a reasonable form. Necessity is blind until it becomes conscious. Freedom is the consciousness of necessity. Society does not consist of individuals, but expresses the sum of interrelations, the relations within which these individuals stand. Landlords, like all other men, love to reap where they never sowed. The ruling ideas of each age have ever been the ideas of its ruling class. Machines were, it may be said, the weapon employed by the capitalists to quell the revolt of specialized labor. The bourgeoisie has torn away from the family its sentimental veil and has reduced the family relation to a mere money relation. In bourgeois society, capital is independent and has individuality, while the living person is dependent and has no individuality. Communism is the riddle of history solved, and it knows itself to be this solution. The worker becomes all the poorer the more wealth he produces. Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. Social progress can be measured by the social position of the female sex. The ideas of the ruling class are in every epoch the ruling ideas. Capital is not a thing, but a social relation between persons mediated by things. The first requisite for the happiness of the people is the abolition of religion. Democracy is the road to socialism. History repeats itself, first as tragedy, second as farce. The circulation of commodities is the original precondition of the circulation of money. The more of himself man attributes to God, the less he has left in himself. The alienation of man thus appears in the fact that the more objects he produces, the less he can possess. Labor in the white skin can never free itself as long as labor in the black skin is branded. Nothing can have value without being an object of utility. The human being is in the most literal sense a political animal, not merely a gregarious animal, but an animal which can individualize itself only in the midst of society. Every emancipation is a restoration of the human world and of human relationships. All history has been a history of class struggles between dominated classes at various stages of social development. Religion is only the illusory sun which revolves around man as long as he does not revolve around himself. Only in community with others has each individual the means of cultivating his gifts in all directions. Money plays the largest part in determining the course of history. The human being is not a bare abstraction inherent in each particular individual. The production of ideas, of conceptions, of consciousness is at first directly interwoven with the material activity and the material intercourse of men. A commodity appears, at first sight, a very trivial thing and easily understood. As exchange value, all commodities are merely definite quantities of congealed labor time. The bureaucracy is a circle from which no one can escape. The executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. The hand mill gives you society with the feudal lord, the steam mill, society with the industrial capitalist. The tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living. In capitalist society, we have a democracy that is curtailed, wretched, false, a democracy only for the rich, for the minority. All social life is essentially practical. All mysteries which lead theory to mysticism find their rational solution in human practice, and in the comprehension of this practice. While the miser is merely a capitalist gone mad, the capitalist is a rational miser. Man is only man in community, in a socialist society. Political power, properly so called, is merely the organized power of one class for oppressing another. It is not the consciousness of men that determines their being, but on the contrary, their social being that determines their consciousness. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. Money is the alienated essence of man's labor and life. In proportion, therefore, as the repulsiveness of the work increases, the wage decreases. Capital comes dripping from head to foot, from every pore, with blood and dirt. Under private property, we have a perfect disillusionment. Capital is reckless of the health or length of life of the laborer, unless under compulsion from society. Revolutions are the locomotives of history. The existence of the state is inseparable from the existence of slavery. The weapon of criticism cannot, of course, replace criticism by weapons. When the train of history speeds by, those who cling to the past are left behind. The national debt, i.e., the alienation of the state, whether despotism, constitutional monarchy, or the democratic republic, marked with its stamp the capitalist era. In proportion as capital accumulates, the lot of the laborer, be his payment high or low, must grow worse. The capitalist mode of production is a system of contradictions. Between equal rights, force decides. The increase of production makes property relations obsolete. The free development of each is the condition for the free development of all. The Tories have always supported the monarchy in order to support class privilege. A nation cannot become free and at the same time continue to oppress other nations. Wage labor, in its actual material shape, has become unbearable. The growing world market connects and fuses different kinds of society. The task is not to settle the future, but to anticipate it. Morality, law, religion are so many bourgeois prejudices. The modern laborer sinks deeper and deeper beneath the conditions of existence. The worker sells not only his labor power, but his soul day by day. The conditions of bourgeois society are too narrow to comprise the wealth created by them. Revolution is necessary not only because the ruling class cannot be overthrown in any other way, but also because the class overthrowing it must rid itself of the old muck. In bourgeois society, living labor is but a means to increase accumulated labor. In society, everything is connected with everything else. The contradictions of capitalism are insurmountable. All social relations are subject to the law of change. Freedom consists in converting the state from an organ superimposed upon society into one completely subordinate to it. Every class struggle is a political struggle. Labor is the source of all wealth. Material conditions determine social development. The ruling class is the force that maintains its control by maintaining its own class interests. Money is the universal equivalent of all value. All human activity is essentially driven by economic forces. Capitalism sows the seeds of its own destruction. The oppressed are allowed once every few years to decide which particular representatives of the oppressing class are to represent and repress them. Class conflict is the engine of historical progress. Property relations define the structure of society. The development of capitalism is both a creative and destructive force. The fall of capitalism is inevitable. Freedom is the recognition of necessity. The nature of human society is determined by its economic base. A specter is haunting Europe, the specter of communism. The state is an instrument of class domination. All revolutions are impossible until they happen. Then they become inevitable. Every capitalistic transaction is based on exploitation. In capitalist society, work is not done for its own sake, but for profit. The unexamined life is not worth living. To know is to know that you know nothing. That is the meaning of true knowledge. I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think. An honest man is always a child. Wonder is the beginning of wisdom. Wise men speak because they have something to say, fools because they have to say something. Courage is knowing what not to fear. The greatest wealth is to live content with little. Justice means minding your own business and not meddling with other men's concerns. The measure of a man is what he does with power. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Happiness depends upon ourselves. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet. He who has overcome his fears will truly be free. You cannot step into the same river twice. The only constant in life is change. Character is destiny. The way up and the way down are one and the same. Man is most nearly himself when he achieves the seriousness of a child at play. As soon as laws are necessary for men, they are no longer fit for freedom. The most momentous thing in human life is the art of winning the soul to good or evil. Silence is better than unmeaning words. Do not say a little in many words, but a great deal in a few. Choose rather to be strong of soul than strong of body. Do not spoil what you have by desiring what you have not. Not what we have, but what we enjoy, constitutes our abundance. The greater the difficulty, the more the glory in surmounting it. Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. It is impossible to live a pleasant life without living wisely and well and justly. It does not matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. Real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. The superior man is modest in his speech, but exceeds in his actions. Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. He who knows does not speak. He who speaks does not know. When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power. Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. Well-being is attained by little and little, and nevertheless it is no little thing itself. Man conquers the world by conquering himself. No evil is honorable, but death is honorable. Therefore death is not evil. The goal of life is living in agreement with nature. Happiness is a good flow of life. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body. Begin at once to live, and count each separate day as a separate life. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. He who laughs at himself never runs out of things to laugh at. No man is free who is not master of himself. I am looking for an honest man. The foundation of every state is the education of its youth. He has the most who is most content with the least. It takes a wise man to discover a wise man. Blushing is the color of virtue. The only routes of inquiry are what is and what is not, and the latter is altogether unthinkable. Thought and being are the same. For never shall this prevail, that things that are not are. You cannot know what is not, that is impossible. One path only is left for us to speak of, namely, that it is. There is geometry in the humming of the strings. There is music in the spacing of the spheres. Above all things, reverence yourself. Friends are as companions on a journey who ought to aid each other to persevere in the road to a happier life. Do not chase after happiness, it is always in you. A thought is an idea in transit. Man is the measure of all things. There are two sides to every question. Let us hold our discussion together in our own persons, making trial of the truth and of ourselves. Nothing exists except atoms and empty space. Everything else is opinion. Concerning the gods, I have no means of knowing whether they exist or not. Happiness resides not in possessions and not in gold. Happiness dwells in the soul. Everywhere man blames nature and fate, yet his fate is mostly but the echo of his character and passions, his mistakes and weaknesses. The brave man is he who overcomes not only his enemies, but his pleasures. Good means not merely not to do wrong, but rather not to desire to do wrong. By desiring little, a poor man makes himself rich. The descent to Hades is the same from every place. Nothing is born or perishes, but things already existing combine and then separate anew. Appearances are a glimpse of the unseen. The mind is the source of all things. Everything has a natural explanation. The moon is not a god but a great rock, and the sun a hot rock. Mankind is poised midway between the gods and the beasts. The stars are like letters that inscribe themselves at every moment in the sky. The search for wisdom is a great way to love. Withdraw into yourself and look. Knowledge, if it does not determine action, is dead to us. Nothing really exists, but human life is governed by convention. We should be without opinions, unwavering and unmoved. Events happen as they happen. Suspend judgment to attain mental peace. Live in accordance with nature, rather than in accordance with custom. Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path, and leave a trail. Rather than love, than money, than fame, give me truth. Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. The greatest weapon against stress is our ability to choose one thought over another. Justice is what love looks like in public. Justice is the first virtue of social institutions, as truth is of systems of thought. Do not block the way of inquiry. Truth is what your contemporaries let you get away with. To be is to be the value of a variable. The mind is not a mirror of nature. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. To be fully human, we must be able to cultivate our emotions. We lose ourselves in what we read, only to return to ourselves, transformed and part of a more expansive world. What is it like to be a bat? The adventure of ideas is in some sense a romance. Philosophy is the education of grown-ups. A necessary truth is a statement which would be true under all possible circumstances. The pulse of the Negro world has begun to beat in Harlem. Philosophy begins when self-consciousness begins. We must make what we mean by mean, always historicize. Social advance depends as much upon the process through which it is secured as upon the result itself. The meaning of life is not in what happens to us, but in what we do. The meaning of life is to make life meaningful. We are human beings only through the recognition of others. Individuals have rights, and there are things no person or group may do to them without violating their rights. There is a sense in which the creation of an institutional reality is the most basic human power. Autonomy is the capacity to make laws for ourselves. Freedom is a process of liberating oneself and others. There are possible worlds as real as the actual world we live in. Human beings are by nature open to being enlarged. The route from normal science leads to revolutions in paradigm shifts. Pragmatism is the bridge that connects theory and practice. The imaginary institution of society lies at the heart of all historical creation. The self is something which has a development. It is not initially there, at birth. Our experience is the product of a transactional process. There is no such thing as a language, not if a language is anything like what many philosophers have supposed. Consciousness is something we do, not something that happens to us. In a different voice, women speak of moral problems in terms of care and responsibility. Cosmopolitanism is the name not of the solution, but of the challenge. In killing, we do not kill, we let die. Paternalism is the interference with a person's liberty for their own good. To make sense of our practices, we must see that they are held together by reasons. Democracy, at its heart, is about the capacity for self-governance. Language evolves in response to our needs, not from any abstract ideal. Justice is plural in form. The idea of liberty is necessarily tied to the context of its exercise. Democracy thrives when it fosters dissent and open discussion. Caring is the foundation of all ethical action. Injustice arises not from the distribution of goods, but from domination and oppression. We are answerable to others, not just for what we do, but for what we say. Justice requires both redistribution and recognition. A society that does not prioritize equality cannot claim to be just.